Welcome to this Fiction Brain Masterclass on architecting plot-driven stories. Today, we are going to break down one of the most powerful narrative structures available to any writer. So, what exactly is a plot-driven story? At its heart, it asks a single propulsive question. What happens next? This kind of story prioritizes external events and the relentless sequence of cause and effect. If you write thrillers, mysteries, or action, this is the architecture you need to master. Let's begin at the very core of it all. Every plot-driven story runs on a primary engine, and that engine is external conflict. Without friction, a story simply stands still. External conflict provides the resistance that forces your protagonist to move, to adapt, and to make difficult choices. This forward momentum is usually generated by three distinct external forces. The first force is the antagonist. These are the direct opposing characters whose goals fundamentally clash with your protagonist's objectives. The second force is the environment. Think of natural disasters, harsh landscapes, or raw survival scenarios that threaten physical safety. The third force is societal pressure. This includes oppressive governments, rigid cultural norms, or systemic injustices that create a much broader arena of struggle. Together, these pressures forge a relentless chain of cause and effect. And this is critical. A plot cannot just be a random sequence of events loosely tied together with the words, "and then." Instead, every scene must function as a logical consequence of the scene before it. Think of it as the rule of therefore and but. Event A happens, therefore event B occurs, but a new complication suddenly arises. This continuous loop of action and consequence is what drives your protagonist forward. Without this friction, the story stalls, and your momentum is lost entirely. Now let's talk about pacing. Pacing is often misunderstood as simply the speed of a story, but it is better described as the heartbeat of your narrative, a rhythm of tension and release. If we map narrative tension over time, a well-built plot looks like a wave, naturally ebbing and flowing. The peaks represent high-intensity action and climactic moments. These thrill your audience, but they also consume immense emotional energy. The valleys are the low-intensity periods of exposition, rest, and reflection. These crucial drops allow the audience to breathe and process the plot. Constant high speed inevitably leads to audience exhaustion, but constant slowness results in pure boredom. Mastering pacing means carefully balancing these structural patterns, which brings us to a key idea: tropes. When we hear the word trope, we often mistake it for a cliché. But in plot-driven storytelling, structural tropes are something entirely different. They are the essential architectural scaffolding that holds your narrative together. Picture your story as a layered building. At the very base, you have your structural tropes. These are the functional patterns and pacing rhythms that audiences subconsciously expect, giving you a stable foundation. Built on top of that foundation is the genre layer, which dictates the specific rules and tone. And finally, at the very peak, sits your unique voice, the specific characters, and fresh dialogue that only you can bring to the table. To understand these structural tropes, we have to look at the foundational blueprint of narrative architecture. This is the three-act structure. In a plot-driven story, this framework organizes your external conflict into a clear progression. Act 1 is the setup. Here, you establish the normal world until a disruptive event, the inciting incident, forces your protagonist into action. This is where the external momentum officially begins. Act 2 is the confrontation. Your protagonist crosses the threshold into the inverted world of the conflict. At the midpoint, a major shift occurs, raising the stakes and making it impossible to turn back. Act 3 is the resolution. The external pressures peak at the climax, forcing a definitive end to the conflict and establishing a new equilibrium. Now, certain genres are inherently built for this plot-driven delivery. The three core examples are thriller, mystery, and action. In a thriller, the narrative engine is suspense, driven by a ticking clock to stop an external threat. In a mystery, the plot revolves around uncovering a hidden truth by piecing together clues. In action, the story relies on escalating physical obstacles and high-stakes set pieces. All three of these genres prioritize external events and tangible stakes over internal character arcs. In these stories, character growth is simply a byproduct of surviving the plot. Let's look closer at each one. When we examine the thriller, the narrative engine relies entirely on the anticipation of a negative outcome. Unlike other genres, the protagonist in a thriller is primarily reactive. They are thrust into a scenario where they must prevent a looming catastrophe. This creates the genre's defining characteristic, suspense. Suspense is not just surprise. It is the audience's awareness of a threat that the characters must navigate. To force the protagonist into action, thrillers employ a ticking clock. This is a strict, non-negotiable time limit that exponentially raises the stakes. Now, we move from the ticking clock into the intricate architecture of the mystery. In a plot-driven mystery, the engine is not about preventing a future disaster. Instead, it is about reconstructing a past event. The plot functions as an elaborate puzzle. The central truth already exists, but it has been deliberately fragmented and hidden from the audience. As the story progresses, the protagonist uncovers these scattered clues, methodically connecting them. The momentum is driven entirely by this logical connectivity, pulling us toward the final revelation of the truth. Finally, let's examine the action genre. Unlike mysteries that uncover hidden truths, action narratives are driven entirely by physical stakes and external momentum. Here, the plot advances through a series of increasingly difficult physical challenges. The protagonist isn't just solving a puzzle, they are surviving a gauntlet. To architect a plot-centric story, you must master three elements. First, establish high stakes. Second, maintain relentless physical conflict. And third, design escalating obstacles. These elements are anchored by what we call set pieces. A set piece is a major, self-contained sequence of action or drama. But here is a common mistake, treating them merely as visually impressive moments. A true set piece is never just a cool scene. It acts as a structural engine, and to function correctly, it must execute four narrative tasks. It must deliver spectacle. It must force a narrative shift, altering the plot's trajectory. It must create resource depletion, costing the protagonist critical time, tools, or allies. And it must permanently raise the stakes. Together, these tasks ensure the set piece irreversibly changes the state of the story. Before we close, let's address a common misconception. Many people assume that plot-driven storytelling inevitably results in thin, underdeveloped characters. They treat plot and character as a zero-sum game, believing external momentum must sacrifice internal depth. But the most effective narratives rely on a deep symbiosis between the two. On one side, you have the character's internal world. On the other side, you have the external plot. The true function of a plot is to act as a crucible. External events apply relentless pressure on your protagonist. Ultimately, plot reveals character through choice under pressure. It uses external conflict to forge genuine internal growth. So as you build your next story, remember this: plot is not the enemy of character. When you architect it correctly, the plot is exactly what brings your character to life.